Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no more lies. We'll never know.
Anytime you hop on the internet, whether it be X or if you're feeling very adventurous, Facebook, the first conversations you will see concerning your Pittsburgh Pirates after the normal debates about the anemic offense and the fire Andy Haynes chance would be the trade proposals that are out there. These are being discussed not only by fans, but also by the Pittsburgh Pirates media, Pittsburgh media in general, as well as the national pundits in the media. And there are discussions concerning, who should be traded, where they should be traded to, what the actual return should be. Is this a good return? Can we get this guy? Which guys are quote unquote untouchable? And this has been going on for a little while, has really started to ramp up after Bob Nutting sat down with the Pittsburgh Pirates media to kind of discuss the state of the franchise. And I think it would just be easier to kind of read what Bob Nutting said rather than trying to, just paraphrase it and maybe missing some stuff. So Nutting says, I think we should be prepared to move early. I think we should be prepared to take advantage of opportunities when they arise. I know Ben has the flexibility to look across a broader range of alternatives, options, but also a timeline of when it makes sense to strike. And the thing that was kind of focused on in that conversation, should be prepared to move early. And people said, well, then Ben comes out and echoes the comments or feels the need to actually be maybe motivated to do something, without realizing that Ben Cherington addressed this exact topic about 2 weeks prior to that, back on, I believe it was like June 7th or June 8th. And this is when Cherington made comments when he's looking in the long-term and the short-term. People are asking, is this a long-term thing, short-term thing? And he said, I think we always have to be doing both. We're always going to be willing to do both. They're not mutually exclusive. And that's where we should be. And this is the key part to his comment coming up right here. We should be willing, prepared, and ready to give up a minor league player for a major league player if it helps our team and we think it makes sense. At the same time, we have to be as dogged about continuing to build our young talent base, whether it's through the draft or how we're doing player development. So he was already addressing that stuff, and he did kind of say some stuff, but it was pretty much the same stuff after Nutting spoke. And It was about them being in the mix for a playoff push and him focusing on it starting internally. And he said, I think by now we have a pretty good sense of where the team is. I still believe we have players that are capable of more. I'll continue to say that because I believe in them. We'll continue to focus energy internally as far as how we can continue to get better. And then he immediately went on to say, we want to add to our team. We want to make the team better. That is our job. We're going to be engaged in an effort to do that. And of course, it won't surprise you that teams just don't line up and eagerly hand over good players. The pool of players that are realistically available right now is seemingly small, and the list of teams interested in those players is pretty long. That just makes the dance interesting right now, but we gotta just stay in it. And he's basically saying the same stuff he was saying before. And he says that doesn't mean trades can't happen early. They can. There probably are some players that could be traded earlier, but a lot of teams are still trying to figure out what they are. Not really willing to give up a major league player trying to get better themselves. Teams are talking, and we're one of those teams. We'll stay on the phones. We want to get better. So if there's an opportunity out there to do that, we want to be ready for it. And it's pretty much the exact same thing he said, during the previous statement. It's not really any different other than saying early at the time that, Nutting said earlier. And he said, I don't think we have to take anything off the board. Acquiring players we know are going to contribute and are controllable past this year, of course, have value. And in a vacuum, yeah, there's probably some preferences for that. But we're not going to close our eyes to anything, even if the player has shorter control. And yes, trades do happen at this point in time, and I want everybody to kind of block out the fact that people are saying and using J.D. Davis as an example of these trades happening early. If that is your benchmark for trades happening early, then the Pirates were ahead on all of that because it's the exact same thing they did with Joey Bart. Joey Bart was DFA'd. J.D. Davis was DFA'd. A trade was made. There are trade proposals out there, and we're going to be talking about some of those. And by we, I am going to be bringing in two very special guests to address two of the trade proposals that have been discussed over the past week or so on X, on Facebook, and in articles by The Athletic. Everybody wants the Pirates to make a big trade, and I'm going to bring in some people here. The first one I'm bringing in is a friend of the show through Chris Lanuti. He is James Fox. He is at James Fox 917. That was probably his ERA as a pitcher in high school. At Future Sox, the pod, the blog. You guys do a great job over there. And obviously everybody knows what we're going to be talking about here. But first of all, the question that I have for you, James, is that with, Chris Getz coming in and everything, some of the trades that they've already made, especially during this offseason, are the White Sox still sellers?
Yeah, I think the White Sox are willing to move like anything that they have. Now, we're going to get into Luis Robert and probably Garrett Crochet. I don't know that those guys move necessarily, but it's not because Chris Getz doesn't have an appetite for it. I think he recognized quickly it's going to take a few years, and they're just going to try to bottom out, get as much as they can, draft well, start over essentially. So they got a lot of money coming off the books. I think there's arguments to be made to not trade Luis Robert yet and to keep Garrett Crochet and extend him, but look, similar to what you guys talk about, there's, issues with the owner in Chicago as well, where they just, they spend more than the Pirates, but they don't spend like they should in the division that they're in. So these are just things that we're going to be dealing with here.
Yeah, because the White Sox, as of the time of this recording, they have, I believe, 59 losses, could be on their way to 60, even though I did bring home a win with the family in Detroit on Saturday when we went to see the White Sox play, because as everybody knows at this point in time from listening to this podcast, my wife and her in-laws are huge Southsiders, huge White Sox fans. So, yeah, you mentioned the big names. You got Luis Robert Jr., Lou Bob, is kind of the guy that everybody is looking at. Everybody knows when healthy, last year, almost 600 plate appearances, 38 home runs, an 857 OPS, 20 stolen bases, a huge impact bat. And that's like one thing that everybody's looking for. Jason Mackey put out a tweet that we talked about before you jumped on here that, he had talked to an NL scout, and it was Hunter Barco, Tamar Johnson, and Lonnie White Jr. going back. And, I was like, that isn't enough. There's no way that's enough, man.
Yeah, I'm sure Pirates fans want to take those three guys and drive them here, if that's the deal. 3.5 years of Luis Robert. It's very similar to, I feel like, when you guys were having the Brian Reynolds discussions and fan bases were trying to like get him for their not great prospects. Right now, I know that that package isn't terrible. Like, it's okay. It's just, if Chris Getz trades Luis Robert, it's going to be much more impact than that. It's going to be like a top 25 prospect in baseball, probably another top 100 guy, and an org top 10. It's 3.5 years of Robert. The hard part is, like, Robert was hurt again this year. He's hurt frequently. He hasn't been great right now, but they're going to sell him as 5-WAR starting center fielder, that hits 35 bombs and plays Gold Glove defense in center. So, just like, to me personally, like, if it happens, Phillies, Mariners, there's like a handful of teams that like could get it done if they wanted to. I just think it would be tough for Pittsburgh personally. And those three players specifically, like, as part of a package, like, I could see the White Sox being interested in, but there's just like, it's missing a big headliner that I'm not sure exists like in the Pirates system right now.
Yeah, the Pirates, they've pretty much brought up all their guys that were the big prospects. Obviously, Paul Skeens would be untouchable. And, Jared Jones is up at this point in time. Nick Gonzalez, even with him, he had kind of dropped off of, some of the listings, some of the radars, and was struggling a little bit. I've seen other trade proposals, and people like throw them out there all the time. And it's like, okay, well, if we give you, Bubba Chandler, Anthony Solomito, and they just keep piling names on top of there. And, as Pirates prospects, they are, all pretty good. But I could see the White Sox wanting to see somebody that's going to have, more of an immediate impact, and, another guy thrown on top of that, like you're saying, that is more in there. And with Luis Robert, especially for the Pirates, in my estimation, what I'm looking at is, okay, you got him for $15 million next year. That, if he's healthy, is a bargain of all bargains. Then you have $20 million and $20 million in 2026 and 27, both with $2 million buyouts. So for the Pirates, like, with them going like at $20 million, like, I hate to say it that way because it's still a very cheap player. But if Luis Robert Jr., has the right hip flexor strain that he's had like 2 out of the last, like, 3 or 4 years, I think it is. You throw in a sprained left wrist, an MCL sprain at the end of last year. I do believe that this is more akin, as you say, to like a Brian Reynolds, type thing where it's like, okay, we're going to ask for the world. The ask is going to be high, but this is also a move that we could technically make in the offseason, and then you still get 3 years of Luis Robert. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and that's where I've kind of leaned towards, like, I don't think the White Sox trade him because I don't think they're going to get enough to actually do it, especially when they could do it this winter or next deadline if they wanted to. I just don't think they're going to get enough in return to actually pull the trigger. Chris Getz can't make a good trade for Luis Robert. He has to make a great trade. Like, if he's going to do this, like, and look, I'm not naive enough to think that they should like keep him because they're going to be seriously contending by 2026, or like he's a Boris client. He's leaving after 27. So I understand, like, if you can get a ton, I understand doing it right now. I just don't think that those offers are going to come, quite frankly. And, with what the Pirates have to offer, I think somebody will beat that, man. I do. And, there's like a couple of chips, like that 37th pick in the draft. Like if they did it before the draft would be appealing to me. Young righty Xander Muth would be appealing to me. But I mean, I think they're going to look for a position player heavy return. And it just doesn't seem like something Pittsburgh can do right now.
Yeah, and if it's position player heavy, the Pirates are position player pretty much light at this point in time within their system. But I wanted to talk to you about a couple other players as well. I know Garrett Crochet's out there. I don't even know if that's like more along the lines of another team. I mean, I would take a starting pitcher, with his profile, the way that he's been playing this year. But a couple other guys that may be having a little bit of down years that I kind of wanted to just breach the subject with you a little bit is like an Andrew Vaughn or Gavin Sheets. Andrew Vaughn this year, his OPS is sitting below 700, does have 9 home runs, but has, kind of profiled as a player that consistently will have, a 720 to 750 OPS, hit like, a little bit less than 20 bombs. Gavin Sheets is actually having a fairly good year, 732 OPS, 7 home runs. For his career, he's right around a 700 OPS type of guy. You say that there is, not a player that the White Sox probably wouldn't trade. Is that other play? Is those like guys that, you think that Getz would try to get something back for?
Yeah, I think so. I think if somebody's interested in either one of those guys, like they could be got for sure. Andrew Vaughn was terrible to start the year. He's underachieved. He was a number 3 overall pick in the 2019 draft, I believe. And he just hasn't hit like he was supposed to. But I mean, yeah, like he could play first base for somebody for sure. I don't know what kind of expectations the White Sox would have in return for him. And Sheets like really shouldn't be too difficult to acquire if somebody wants him. I mean, the biggest thing for him is he just gets played out of position so often. He really shouldn't play in an outfield corner as much as he does. He should be first baseman that faces pretty much righties only. But the one thing with Gavin Sheets, he's never really bought into just the fact that he should be a power hitter, like he should be a masher, and he just kind of doesn't, which is why you end up with like 750 OPSs, like instead of what he could be. So yeah, I think either one of those guys could potentially be available in an interesting deal.
Yeah, and those are guys that I just kind of looked at. I mean, Gavin Sheets, I believe, has 3 ARB years left. Andrew Vaughn just, started his first ARB year, has 2 years left. He got like $3.25 million this year, I believe. My family, who are White Sox fans, will be happy that I knew that kind of off the top of my head because I'm actually, kind of paying attention to both teams. Also, Chris Lanuti, who's co-host of this show, also has his own show, Sox in the Basement. So got to plug that as well on the Bucs in the Basement thing. But James, is there anybody else on the team that you think that would make maybe like a good trade partner for the Pirates?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, you said that they didn't really need pitching, right? I mean, there's like a couple of guys in the bullpen that, like Tommy, you want Tommy Pham? Do you want Paul DeYoung, who's had a resurgent, like 13, 14 homers right now?
I mean, I might take Tommy Pham, but we would take a bullpen guy, seeing that pretty much every single one of our bullpen people, ended up getting either hurt at some point in time during this year, and then now Bednar's hurt again. So who do you got in the bullpen for us?
I think like John Brebbia is interesting. The ERA is not great. The underlying numbers are pretty good. He's striking out a ton of guys. And then Tanner Banks is a 32-year-old lefty with like really good numbers. Just a solid guy but it's like 3 years of control. So that's where like I think he'll be like a little bit valuable too. He's not going to bring back a ton. He'll bring back a back end top 30. But I mean, the White Sox right now are going to, trade pretty much anything anybody wants, I think. So yeah, it should be a lot of trades. I do caution folks that think something's going to happen soon just because like the baseball draft is July 14th. These front offices are typically focused on that. And then the deadline is like that 72 hours right at the end, right? It's probably what we'll see. But, I would think the Pirates would like to do something sooner, like while they're in the race. it just becomes difficult sometimes.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's with the draft being at the time it is now, as opposed to when it was previously. I mean, a lot of people and the scouts are probably all at like the showcases and the draft league and the College World Series and spending their time on that. I mean, I do know that they probably have people out there looking and inquiring into stuff, but like you said, I don't know if that's going to be the moves that are made right now.
Yeah, that's what I would assume too. But I totally understand like the Pirates wanting to be out there and like do something soon. But I do kind of agree with you that I would imagine it would be, not that it would be Andrew Vaughn or Gavin Sheets, right? But there was like a Josh Bell rumor, just like something for rental position players, like might make the most sense for them at this point.
Well, James, I do appreciate you jumping on here real quick. I reached out to you this morning and we're doing it this afternoon. For those of you that don't, please go follow James Fox, James Fox 917 at Future Sox. James, thanks for doing this, brother.
All righty. Thanks, Craig.
Are you a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates and supporting small businesses? If so, Bucs in the Basement has you covered. Introducing the Bucs in the Basement Vouch Store with products from places like Split Rock Coffee. Coffee with a purpose. Established, owned, and operated by disabled veterans, sworn to protect America. Or Camp Craft Cocktails. More than cocktails. It's a mission to build longer tables where everyone is welcome. We try and vouch for these products. Bucs in the Basement, proudly brought to you by VOUCH. Visit our Vouch store at bucksinthebasement.com or simply click on the link in the show notes. Of course, right after James Fox and I get done having our conversation, Shields has an apparent injury, so it doesn't take that completely off the table. And it wasn't even really about Shields. It was about, that type of player, the players that have control, the players that you can maybe keep around a little bit longer and may benefit from a change of scenery. And we're going to address even more of those as we go into an article written by The Athletic and beyond. After exploring the trade with the White Sox, the ones that most Pirates fans want, everybody wants Lou Bob, and if he stays healthy, I mean, every team absolutely wants him. But I reached out to hopefully a new friend here, just getting to know him. They have a podcast and a blog covering the Miami Marlins. It's called Fish on First, at Fish on First. Eli Sussman, at Real Eli, to talk about an article that came out in The Athletic recently. Eli, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on. It's interesting to finally talk the Pirates fan, considering the Pirates are the team that kind of put the Marlins on this course in the first place from the very start of the season, getting swept by the Pirates in Miami for 4 games. They've kind of been all downhill ever since then. And now we're here. Now, it's interesting how quickly things have flipped for the Marlins, but I appreciate both sides of this trade deadline discourse.
Yeah, and the Marlins had come up even before that. It caused some havoc on Pirates social media when you guys had about, I don't know, 15 to 20 healthy pitchers that everybody wanted. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there were some targets that were there, and some trades that people thought were actually going to go down. But you guys have the kind of like maybe the tail of caution, and that might be a play on words there as the Marlins tail. But you can never have too much pitching because you see how this goes. And the Pirates are kind of the same way as, we had JT Brubaker last year. We thought we were going to have Johan Oviedo this year. Mike Burrows finally working his way back up from being injured. So I feel like that the Marlins and the Pirates have been kind of like on each other's radar since before then. And we were really happy when we swept you guys, because we're like, oh, this was the team that, celebrated in front of us for making the playoffs last year. And it's like, oh, okay, we actually did well against a good team. And then we did that to the Nationals. And now we're looking at it and going, oh, okay, so we beat two teams that we probably should beat. But yeah, definitely, Jim Bowden comes out with the article in The Athletic. And I feel like that he basically, at least on the Pirates side, pulled up the MLB pipeline, top 30 prospects, and basically said, what are kind of maybe the Marlins needs to a degree, and what players would fit on that as far as, that prospect list. You look at, Braxton Ashcraft, number 5, Mitch Jebb, number 6, Jack Brannigan, number 8, and didn't really look at the stats and, what was going on with each of those players at this point in time during the season, and kind of picked that up. And what was your first thoughts when you saw this? Because I know, as you guys could possibly be, some sellers here at this point in time. There's not too many teams that are being listed as definite sellers. Like, what was your thoughts on this trade when you first looked at it?
I would like, great job, Jim. Makes a lot of sense. Get it done now, immediately. That 5-player proposal that he mentioned, that includes sending Josh Bell, Brian De La Cruz to Pittsburgh. I think the Marlins would leap at that offer, as you alluded to. And this especially applies to Ashcraft, where I think his stock has gone up considerably from where it was just a few months ago. He's having an excellent season in the upper minors. And even as a Marlins team that has made it a strength for them to develop starting pitching. And right now, things among their healthy pitchers in the organization, things have generally progressed pretty well. But they do have this really small hole, I would say, on the pitching depth side when it comes to guys in the upper minors, exactly like Ashcraft. I think that's a player that would fit in remarkably well with their organization, that they would value highly, that I think him alone, they would value his future as much as somebody like De La Cruz. And if they were able to get additional prospects as well, such as Mitch Jebb, who has been on the other side of the spectrum in terms of performance this year and how much he has struggled, I think regardless of that, the Marlins would love to buy low on somebody like that, because that is the greater need in their organization. Even last year, seemingly every single year, they have just a big reason why they're in this position, why they overhauled their front office, is because of their inability to develop hitters, no matter where they're drafted, no matter how much pedigree they have. They've had such little success in terms of converting these guys as tools into actual results, even in the minors, and then especially in the majors. So that's going to be the priority at this deadline, is to try to load up more so on hitting prospects, but they could get one of each without even moving anybody that's essential to their future. I think they would leap at the chance. So yeah, the question is how much the Pirates would value somebody like Brian De La Cruz, who in some ways is having his most consistent year as a big leaguer, and second straight year that he's playing every single day. But I guess I could tell you in a little bit that there are strengths to his games, but there's overall, it's a really unremarkable profile that I imagine the Pirates themselves might be able to. I don't know how much of an upgrade he'd really be over what Pittsburgh already has.
Yeah, and we were talking about that before we got on here. And for Mitch Jebb, I mean, Mitch Jebb's in Greensboro now, which should be a fairly, hitter friendly ballpark. Mitch Jebb doesn't have, the power profile that, might play a lot better in Greensboro. But, right now it has an OPS below 600, has 4 home runs, is striking out at about a 25% clip. Base on balls is a little bit below 10. But when we were talking about Brian De La Cruz, who I, kind of sold to, that I have him and have had him on my dynasty team with Chris, the co-host of Bucs in the Basement, also host of Sox in the Basement. And he's been a great player to have at times, but an inconsistent and frustrating player to have at times. But you said this year, has been his best year. He does have 14 home runs, something that the Pirates would absolutely take on within their team. Not really does have a great defensive profile at times. I looked, and he's an average, outfielder, to sometimes a little bit below average. And I kind of compared him to Edward Olivares. Edward Olivares is having a little bit of a down year. It's not the year. We were looking at his profile from last year in Kansas City, where he had a 103 OPS plus. He had, 12 home runs in a little over 350 plate appearances. We were thinking if that stayed right in there. So maybe De La Cruz would be an upgrade. But then I look at Josh Bell, and Josh Bell, in a nostalgic way, of course I want him back. I was at his second game. I didn't get to make it to the first game where he got his first hit, but I did get to go to a game where he had a grand slam against the Cubs, and it's probably one of the loudest I've heard PNC Park be outside of like a playoff game, like the Blackout Series. Like, this was like, okay, our team is gonna, come back to prominence again quicker than we thought it would be. We thought maybe the window was closed. So with him coming back, the big thing for Josh Bell is, $16.5 million. I look at the B WAR right now, and that is like a negative 0.8. The power that he, kind of showed when he was coming, and when you guys, got him last year, if you want to give me that player, a 270, 388, 488 slash line with 11 home runs for the remainder of the season, yes, I'll absolutely sign up for that. But for the player who, has 8 home runs right now, which, okay, good, but is, hitting like he was in Cleveland prior to that, I don't know, man. That's one where it's just like, do I want to give up Ashcraft? And for, Ashcraft, yes, his stock has risen. He's, finally his first full year back from Tommy John this year. But we're even looking at it right now, at least on our end, he's at 69 innings. What is he going to go? Like maybe 110 innings this year? Because he went 50 some. As a Marlins fan, you're probably not even really thinking about that because you're not thinking about this year.
Right. It's exactly where, as desperate as they are for starting pitching just to fill spots in their rotation, they've used 14 different starters halfway through the season already. They're not acquiring him because they need his arm at the big leagues right now. They're here because of his future. They're in an interesting spot where this deadline was supposed to be largely about the Marlins shopping their major league starting pitchers, but all of them are hurt. All the ones that you'd want to deal are hurt at the same time, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to force a deal right now. From Jesus Luzardo to Braxton Garrett, Ryan Weathers, Edward Cabrera, all of them on the IL all at the same time, unfortunately, which takes some of the fun out of it, but it also puts them in inevitably, we expect several of those guys to be traded, whether it's this upcoming offseason or the next trade deadline. They're going to need to restock with a few arms of some kind, and Ashcraft makes a lot of sense for that. But yeah, whereas from the Pirates perspective, considering the way this year has gone, and considering how wide open the National League wildcard race is, yeah, with all the guys in the upper minors, you're wondering, can they contribute to the big league team at some point this year? And but if it's somebody like that, and yeah, certainly the motivations are completely different for these teams, where the Marlins, if they're looking at guys that are in the upper minors for the Pirates, even outside of Ashcraft. It's all about 2025 and beyond. And honestly, it's a lot about 2026 and beyond with this team at this point. It could be both 2020, both these next 2 years where wins and losses at the big league level are just not going to be a priority, it looks like.
Well, the next question I would ask you, because you're saying you would accept this trade. I'm not sure if I would accept this trade. Let's have a little bit of fun here and try to see, like, is there anybody else on the Marlins that you think is probably, like, most definitely, on the trade block, and who are, you're trying to move, and maybe what you're looking to get back for them? So who are, some other players that are definitely probably more than likely on the trade block? And I know everybody from the Pirates end of this is just like, let's just get Jazz Chisholm. That's who they want. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, we can start with Jazz Chisholm because he is among their healthy guys now that Luzardo is hurt right now and will be out until he's not even eligible to come off the IL until mid-August. Jazz is going to be the biggest asset that they could potentially trade. He's got 2.5 years of club control still to go. For once this year, he's been fully healthy. He's missed maybe 1 or 2 games the entire season so far while playing center field every single day. And I think the Pirates are pretty far down the list in terms of center field production that they've been getting this season. So even though Jazz, he's not playing at an all-star level, the level that he is playing at is plenty good enough to be an upgrade. That would make a whole lot of sense. And he would be somebody that could get back actual potential franchise-changing prospects in return. That's going to be the big question, where his value might not get any higher than it is right now when you combine the club control and him being healthy and as young as he is. And at the same time, the Marlins need to get it right. There's immense pressure on them to get what they have in return. This is what makes it different from, say, the rebuild they had from 2017 to 2018, where they had several of these really impact hitters that they could move and get a lot in return. What's concerning and frustrating from the Marlins perspective is they don't have a ton of assets that they know can bring back a lot of prospect depth to totally turn around this farm system. And Jazz is one of them. So I think he would be available for the right price, but it's going to be a steep price just because I think the Marlins know that even this offseason, because of him still having 2 more years to go of control, and because of the versatility that he has to not only be a center fielder, but potentially to go back to the middle infield on certain teams. If you get to the offseason, then they could really talk with just about every team in the big leagues about finding a creative fit right there. So he's the one. So much is about him because how they do in that trade will go a long way in terms of when realistically this team can get back to being competitive at the big league level.
Yeah, and it would fit a need for the Pirates, obviously, as you stated, like the center field and then the production and everything. And then also, the handedness of the batting. It's something that we really don't have, a lot of. And my thing is that, I mean, this is probably where we're starting to talk about like a Bubba Chandler. This is where, we're starting to talk about like a Tamar Johnson. And I'm not even sure if that would get it done. And this is a conversation that I had, earlier on in this episode with James Fox, is that, with the Luis Robert thing is, there are other teams out there who are in competition who have, stronger prospect pools than we do. For the Pirates, a lot of that was built on Skeens and Jones, who are now already up. So the prospect depth that we had is really it's not there anymore. So I'm not sure if that even gets it done. Would I do it for that? Really, at this point in time, especially for a player that you're going to have control of for more than just this year, I think you almost have to pull the trigger. Because we don't even know, what Bubba Chandler is at this point in time. He's coming off a really good start, but also had an injury that he even admits to himself that, it's something that flares up from time to time because of an old injury, and it looks not so good because it's like forearm tightness. So yeah, that one, I think that I would pull the trigger on, just because of the years of control and just because a position of need that we really don't have an answer for in our organization.
Yeah, and Tamar Johnson is a specific name that came up recently for us when we recorded an episode of our podcast just a few days ago about potential deadline deals. He checks so many boxes that the Marlins organization needs. He was somebody that, from our perspective, seems like somebody that would be on the radar for them to draft themselves during that particular year when he was available. And I'm trying to remember exactly where he went in that order and why they didn't get him. But
He
yeah,
went number
overall,
4.
yeah, overall, he was that the same? Yeah, he went off the board just a couple picks ahead of them in 2022. And I don't want to go into a tangent, but the Marlins really whiffed with that choice that they made a couple picks later in Jacob Berry, who just at this point is a total non-factor in their future plans. So if they could right that wrong and also get a couple assets on top of that, then I think that would be a very competitive offer for Jazz. So, I mean, the question is what other teams also leap into the conversation for him. Really across the league, center field production offensively has been really low. I think the OPS for center fielders across baseball is 670 or so this year. There's a lot of contending teams that are winning despite not getting much offense there, including the Philadelphia Phillies, including the Kansas City Royals, the team that the Marlins just played. So there should be several teams in the mix for them. But yeah, it's going to take multiple pretty big assets, and especially the priority is going to be on the hitting side for somebody like Tamar. The question is whether or not there's anybody that has an even higher ceiling potentially that another of these organizations is willing to give up. And so they are going to spend the next month trying to figure that out, I think. It does seem, unfortunately, like an inevitability that Jazz is going to get traded at some point, which is it's frustrating because he's still only 26 years old. This is the very first time they've put together a full season. It's really demoralizing that he's the most recognizable guy on the team, especially on the hitting side. And it just signals how far away the team potentially is from competing if they are going to trade him. Which just reiterates that they need to really get it right. And but this does seem like the opportune time to deal him, just because there are several other teams seemingly in the Pirates position that'd be willing to bid on him right now.
Yeah. And for Pirates fans, before I let you go here, I'm going to ask you, is there anybody else that you think might be a name that maybe fits somewhere either in between a De La Cruz and a Chisholm, or if they're like I had brought up a Tanner Scott once again, left-handed reliever, but this would be for the Pirates. It would be like, well, we would maybe trade for him if Aroldis Chapman got injured. But we already have kind of that, rental type player on the roster already.
Tanner Scott's the one that is a lock to be traded. He's the one guy, because of his pending free agency and how well he's performing right now, the reality that the Marlins are not going to be paying top dollar to extend him and to re-sign him for multiple years when they're in the position that they're in. He's absolutely gone. And I would think that almost every team has some interest, just because he doesn't need to be a closer with his new team. He has been the closer with the Marlins for almost a full year now, but he's just a great high leverage guy who misses bats, who in particular recently has been on a hot streak. I think he has allowed runs in only one of his last 20 outings or so. So he's peaking at the right time. It's just that there's also the concern about his history of walks. He's one of the higher career walk rates. I think it's right there with Chapman for his career, except without Chapman's dominance. And the peaks. Overall, he has not sustained peak performance the same way that Chapman has. Obviously, it's just recently he has been. And this year he's having success in spite of those walks. So I've been kind of cautioning Marlins fans that I don't think they're going to get a ton in return, even with a bunch of teams interested, just because of the pending free agency, because of the concerns that he's not going to be able to sustain this kind of run prevention if he's walking almost one batter every single outing. But he is going to be moved to whatever the highest bidder is right here. I kind of agree with you that I think there are other teams that are a little bit more desperate for high leverage lefty relief help than the Pirates are. But he's going to be gone one way or another, I expect.
Yeah, and this has been a great chat, Eli. Like I said, for anybody that doesn't, please go follow Fish on First, read their stuff, listen to the podcast, watch the podcast. Also follow Eli at Real Eli. And I feel like that there's a possibility we're going to have you back on here in the upcoming weeks because, I mean, the trade partner thing, they were talking before, it kind of seems like, and, Ben Cherington may be talking with you guys again.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to come back on if that's the case, and I hope we do. Just because in the midst of what's been a miserable season, all you can ask for is that the Marlins do something at this deadline. And considering all the losses on the pitching side, it has kind of limited their options in terms of interesting pieces that could actually be on the move. But at this point, if they've already gone so far towards the rebuilding end, hopefully over the next month they take advantage of what should be a seller's market. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This episode, I didn't just want to have a discussion amongst, Pirates fans or people that are following the Pirates concerning these trades that are out there. I wanted to get opinions that are different from ours, how they value their players, how they value and see some of our players, because I believe at times we either overvalue our players or maybe undervalue a player coming back from a different team who we may look for in a trade. I still believe that a trade, if it is going to happen, will not happen for at least a couple weeks. I've been wrong before, and if that does happen, we will be right back here to cover it. Until next time, everybody, let's go Bucs, and hopefully the next time you hear my voice will be over 500.